my daughter said. "We're only inviting you out of pity, so don't stay long." I just smiled, took a sip of my drink, and quietly left. The patio was filled with neighbors, friends, and the smell of barbecue smoke. Chloe, my 32-year-old daughter, stood near the grill with her husband, Mark. She didn't lower her voice when she delivered the insult. A few guests shifted awkwardly, staring at their paper plates. Mark just chuckled, flipping a burger as if Chloe had made a brilliant joke. No one offered a defense. No one even looked surprised. At 64, I had learned a lot about human nature, mostly through being a widow for the past 8 years. I knew that arguing with someone who thrived on an audience was a waste of breath. I set my half-empty glass of iced tea on the edge of the picnic table. I didn't cry, and I didn't demand an apology. I simply turned around and walked across the lawn to the small guest cottage at the back of the property. 3 years ago, I had given them the main house to raise my grandchildren in, taking the tiny cottage for myself. I thought it was a generous way to keep the family close. Instead, it had slowly turned me into their unpaid maid, full-time babysitter, and convenient punching bag. Inside my quiet living room, I sat at my small dining table and pulled out the thick leather binder where I kept my household budgets. For years, I had confused keeping the peace with letting myself be trampled. Chloe's comment didn't break my heart. It merely flipped a switch in my mind. The illusion of our happy arrangement was gone. I opened the binder to the section labeled Main House. I grabbed a red pen. The time for silent endurance was over. I was going to dismantle the life I had built for them, piece by piece. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 7:15 a.m. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. Usually, this was my cue to hurry across the lawn, make pancakes for her 2 kids, and get them dressed while she and Mark slept in. I ignored the call and poured myself a second cup of black coffee. 10 minutes later, heavy footsteps stomped onto my porch. The screen door rattled. "Mom, are you awake? The kids need breakfast, and I have a yoga class," Chloe called out, peering through the mesh. I stepped up to the door, keeping it locked. "I'm busy today. You'll have to handle breakfast." Chloe blinked, stepping back. "Busy? Doing what you never do anything on Saturday." "Handling my finances," I replied calmly. "Have a good class." I walked away from the door before she could argue. Back at my table, I opened my laptop. Chloe and Mark believed they were independent adults. They boasted about their modern lifestyle and their newly renovated kitchen. What they conveniently forgot was who actually funded the foundation of that lifestyle. When I let them move into the main house, I kept the property taxes, home insurance, and all the major utilities in my name. I had set up autopay from my checking account, thinking I was giving them a head start to save money. They never brought it up, so they simply stopped paying for their own lives. I logged into the utility company's portal. I canceled the autopay for the electricity, the water, and the high-speed fiber internet. Next, I logged into my auto insurance account and removed the SUV Chloe drove. It was registered in my name, and I had been covering the premiums for 4 years. I didn't leave them in the dark immediately. The bills would generate notices in a few days. I closed my laptop, feeling lighter than I had in a decade. By noon, the financial safety net they didn't even know existed was completely gone. 3 days later, the cracks began to show. I was on the porch, repotting some ferns, when the main house's front door flew open. Mark marched out, staring at his phone and tapping the screen violently. "Willa, is your Wi-Fi down?" he called out, not bothering to say hello. I'm in the middle of a fantasy football draft, and the whole house just lost connection. I brushed dirt from my gardening gloves. My internet is working fine. Mark, you might want to check your own account. It's all one network, he huffed, marching closer. Just reset the router. I separated the networks yesterday, I informed him. I canceled the main house's plan. You'll need to call the provider and set up an account in your name. Mark froze, his phone hovering in midair. You canceled the internet. Why would you do that? Because I don't live in that house, I stated. I picked up my watering can. It's time you and Chloe managed your own bills. He stood there, processing the words, before turning on his heel and stomping back inside. 10 minutes later, Chloe came storming across the grass. What is Mark talking about? You turned off our Wi-Fi, she demanded, crossing her arms. I stopped paying for it, I corrected. There's a difference. Chloe rolled her eyes. Mom, stop being dramatic just because I made a joke at the barbecue. Turn it back on. We need it. No, she stared at me. It was a word I rarely used with her, and it hung in the air like a heavy stone. Excuse me. The answer is no. Chloe, I'm no longer paying your utility bills. I met her gaze, keeping my voice perfectly steady. I have errands to run. Please close the gate on your way out. I left her standing on my lawn, her mouth slightly open. That was just the first domino. Later that afternoon, I packed a small overnight bag. My son, Dean, lived 2 hours away. He was quiet, independent, and always treated me with simple, steady respect. I had decided to spend a few days at his place to let the dust settle and to let the reality of my absence sink in for Chloe. Before I got into my sedan, I noticed my silver SUV parked in the main driveway. Chloe treated that car as her personal shuttle. She had taken the spare key 2 years ago and never returned it, claiming it was easier for fitting the kids' car seats. I walked into the main house through the back door. It was unlocked, as usual. The kitchen was a mess of cereal bowls and unwashed pans. Chloe was upstairs, arguing with Mark about the internet provider. I walked over to the hook by the fridge, took the SUV key, and slipped it into my pocket. I drove out of the neighborhood, watching the main house shrink in the rearview mirror. When I arrived at Dean's place, he had dinner waiting. We sat on his back deck, and I told him exactly what had happened at the barbecue and what I had done since. Dean didn't offer fake sympathy. He just handed me a plate of grilled salmon. It's about time, Mom. You've let them treat you like a doormat for too long. I thought I was helping, I admitted, looking at the setting sun. Helping someone stand up is good. Carrying them while they complain about how you're holding them is just masochism. Dean pointed out. I smiled. He was right. I slept soundly that night in his spare room. My phone was on silent, resting on the nightstand. When I woke up, there were 7 missed calls and a string of frantic text messages. When Chloe woke up to run her morning errands, her free ride was literally gone. 5 days later, everything hit at once. I was sitting at Dean's kitchen table, enjoying a quiet morning, when the phone rang again. This time, I answered. Where is the car? Chloe's voice bordered on a shriek. I have to take the kids to swimming lessons. And the car is gone. Did it get towed? The SUV is parked in my assigned spot at my cottage. I answered. I came back early this morning and moved it. Why would you do that without telling me I need it? It's my vehicle. Chloe. I decided I don't want the mileage running up anymore. You and Mark have his sedan. Mark takes his car to work, she yelled. How am I supposed to get around? Hurry, you'll have to figure that out. A long, heavy pause followed. I could hear her breathing hard through the speaker. This is because of the party, isn't it? You're punishing us over one stupid comment. I'm not punishing you, I said evenly. I'm just agreeing with you. If my presence is a burden, then my financial support must be, too. I'm stepping back. Before she could launch into another tirade, she gasped, Wait, did you do something to the electricity? 2, I just got an email saying our auto pay bounced and the account is past due. I removed my card from that account on Saturday. The water and the insurance. 2, are you insane? The panic in her voice was real now. Do you know how much all of that costs? I know exactly how much it costs, I replied. I've been paying it for 3 years. I hung up the phone and set it on the table. Her face must have turned pale as the math finally caught up with her. I drove back to my cottage the next morning. The moment my tires crunched on the gravel driveway, the back door of the main house swung open. Chloe and Mark marched over. Mark looked furious. Chloe looked exhausted. We need to talk, Mark demanded, stopping at the edge of my porch. I stepped out of my car, holding my groceries. Good morning to you. 2. Mark, don't play games. Willa, he snapped. We spent 4 hours yesterday setting up accounts. They want deposits for the utilities because the accounts are new. We don't have that kind of liquid cash right now. That sounds like a budgeting issue, I noted, unlocking my front door. Chloe stepped forward, her eyes red. Mom, you can't just drop this on us. It's almost $1,000 a month in bills we weren't planning for. Plus, I had to rent a car today. I placed my grocery bags on the kitchen counter and turned to face them through the screen door. You are 2 working adults in your 30s. Paying for the water you drink and the power you use is not a punishment. It is the bare minimum. But it's your house, Chloe argued. You're supposed to maintain it. I pulled a crisp, single-page spreadsheet from my purse and handed it through the door. This outlines the property taxes, the maintenance fund, and the insurance. Since it is my house, I will be collecting rent starting on the 1st of next month to cover these costs. It's fair market value, minus a family discount. Mark stared at the paper. His face flushed bright red. You're charging us rent after giving us the house, so I let you borrow the house, I corrected. Now, the terms have changed. They stared at the numbers, realizing they couldn't afford the life they were living. Chloe crumpled the paper in her fist. You're doing this to be cruel. You're trying to force us out. I'm doing this to protect my retirement, I answered. I've spent thousands keeping you comfortable while you tell your friends you only invite me around out of pity. If I am truly that unwanted, I will stop imposing on your lives. But my money stays with me. What about the kids? Chloe shot back, her favorite tactic. Do you want your grandkids living in the dark? Do you want them moving away? I looked directly into her eyes, refusing to take the bait. I love my grandchildren very much. I will always have a warm, well-lit home for them to visit. But I will not be manipulated into paying for your lifestyle using them as a shield. Mark shook his head, throwing his hands in the air. This is ridiculous. We'll pay the utilities, fine. But we are not paying rent. We're family. Family respects one another, I said softly. You have 30 days to decide if you want to sign the lease. If not, I expect the house to be empty by the end of next month. I gently closed the solid wooden door, shutting out their shocked faces. I slid the deadbolt into place. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't remind them of every sacrifice I had made since their father passed away. I just gave them a clear choice and a firm deadline. I went to the kitchen, unpacked my groceries, and made a fresh pot of coffee. Outside, I could hear Mark shouting in frustration and Chloe pacing on the lawn. For the first time in years, the noise didn't make my stomach churn. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in panic. From my cottage window, I watched their reality fracture. Delivery trucks, which used to arrive daily with packages of clothes and home decor, stopped coming. Mark spent his weekends pushing his own lawnmower instead of paying the landscaping crew. Chloe had to cancel her weekly manicures and her premium gym membership. They tried to find an easy way out. Dean called me on a Tuesday to let me know Mark had asked him for a short-term loan. Dean had flatly refused. They asked Mark's parents, who also declined, citing their own fixed income. One evening, Chloe knocked softly on my door. I let her in. She sat on my small sofa, twisting her hands together. "Mom, I'm sorry about what I said at the party," she murmured, looking at the floor. "It was stupid. I was just trying to sound cool in front of the neighbors." I sat across from her. "I know. Chloe. So, can we just go back to normal? Mark is losing his mind with the budget. And I really need the SUV on Thursdays." I looked at her. She wasn't sorry for disrespecting me. She was sorry she had lost her convenience. Normal wasn't working for me, I explained. "The lease agreement is on the counter. The rent is due on the 1st. Her fake remorse vanished instantly. She stood up, her face hardening. "You're really going to choose money over your own daughter?" "I'm choosing my dignity," I replied. "Something you forgot I had." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. An apology born from an empty wallet is rarely a true one. Day 30 arrived. Chloe and Mark did not sign the lease. They simply couldn't afford it without entirely changing their spending habits. A sacrifice neither was willing to make. Instead, they found a cramped, 3-bedroom apartment closer to Mark's office. A moving truck pulled into the driveway early Saturday morning. I stayed on my porch, drinking tea, watching them haul boxes out of the beautiful home I had maintained for them. Dean drove down to help, but mostly he just stood by the front door, ensuring they didn't take any of the appliances or fixtures that belonged to the property. Chloe avoided looking at me all morning. When she finally walked past the cottage carrying a box of toys, she stopped. "I hope you're happy," she muttered, "living all alone with your giant empty house." "I am comfortable," I answered honestly. "And I'll see you and the kids on Sundays, if you'd like." She didn't answer. She just kept walking. When the truck finally pulled away, Dean walked over and handed me a shiny new key. He had already changed the locks on the main doors. "How do you feel?" he asked, sitting beside me on the porch steps. I looked at the big, empty house. It didn't look daunting anymore. It looked like an asset. It looked like freedom. "I feel tired," I admitted, "but a good kind of tired." She finally understood that my silence wasn't weakness. It was a deadline. I didn't move back into the main house. It held too many ghosts of my past and too much tension from the present. Instead, 2 months later, I put the property on the market. It sold quickly to a nice young couple who were thrilled by the big backyard. With the money from the sale, I bought a bright, modern condo in a quiet community near Dean's neighborhood. Chloe and Mark adjusted to their new reality slowly. They had to learn how to cook at home, budget for groceries, and share one vehicle. The entitlement didn't vanish overnight, but the lack of a safety net forced them to grow up. We didn't have a tearful, cinematic reconciliation. Our relationship simply reset on new terms. When they wanted to visit, they called first. When they brought the kids over, they didn't expect me to serve them or clean up their messes. If they crossed a line, I simply ended the visit. I started taking painting classes. I traveled with a local seniors group. I slept 8 hours a night without worrying about someone else's ungrateful expectations. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for your family and for yourself is to stop softening their falls. When you strip away the free rides and the endless favors, you quickly find out who respects you and who is just using you. I was no longer the pity invite. I was just Willa, a woman who owned her own home, drove her own car, and finally held the keys to her own peace. We often confuse endurance with love, believing that if we just sacrifice enough or make things easy for others, we will eventually earn their respect. But the hardest truth to accept isn't that people will take you for granted. It is realizing that your own silence taught them it was perfectly fine to do so. You cannot buy gratitude with paid bills, and you cannot build a healthy relationship on a foundation of your own exhaustion. Setting a boundary isn't an act of revenge or anger. It is simply removing your dignity from the bargaining table. Sometimes, you don't need a loud argument, a dramatic exit, or the last word to change your life. You just need the quiet realization that your peace of mind is no longer up for negotiation. And then quietly, firmly, take your keys back.